Robert Jenrick, the former Shadow Justice Secretary, former Immigration Minister, former Housing Secretary and Reform's newest MP. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure.
On LBC.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Pleasure. We are speaking to you a week after your very dramatic, very unexpected shock defection last week. How has the last week been for you?
Well, it has been a hell of a week. I can't lie to you. A lot's happened, but I feel excited, actually. It was a decision I spent a lot of time thinking about. I probably agonised over it for too long because it's a conflict, really, of loyalties between your political party, which I've been a part of for a very long time, and what I thought was right for my constituents and for the country. And I resolved to do this over Christmas and in the first few days of this year.
You were talking to your father about that, I read in The Spectator today. Do you want to sort of expand on that conversation?
It's difficult because it's such a big decision, but you can't really talk to many people about it for obvious reasons. But it was a subject of debate over the dinner table at Christmas. Christmas dinner, yeah.
Was it?
It actually was.
Yeah.
Not the only thing we talked about.
Of course, yeah.
But we did talk about it, and he's a very straightforward person. My parents are not political, never part of members of political parties. But he just asked me in the end, if there was a general election tomorrow and you were not involved in politics, who would you vote for? I said Reform.
Did you think about not giving him your honest opinion?
No. And actually, I have a lot of time for my dad, and he is a good person to ask advice.
He's a good sounding board.
He's a good sounding board because he's a very sensible person, and he said, well, if that's how you feel, then be true to yourself, and if you're a Reform MP, be a Reform MP. If you think Reform are better placed to fix the country, then get behind them and use your energy, talents, experience to make them the best possible version of themselves. And that's what I'm doing.
And how did the rest of your other family react? Were they all around the table with you as you're having this conversation, or was it just a one-on-one?
No, they were all there. And look, opinions vary in any family, don't get me wrong. But they were broadly supportive. I think they understood. I mean, the hardest thing of all in these things is actually just the people who have supported you over the years, and I felt nervous that I was, letting some of them down because they'd invested in me and had done things to support me over the years, knocking on doors, helping to get me into Parliament time and again. And, my wife and others who knew them extremely well felt that very keenly. But at the end of the day, you're in politics for a purpose, which is to try to make the country a better place as you see it. And I came to the view over a long period of time that the Conservative Party was not the way to do that. It had let the country down very badly when it was in government on a range of different issues. I had tried to change it, and I don't think anybody could argue other than that I'd been very frank about the mistakes that had happened and urged it to be honest with itself, to bring forward different people and policies. But I had, in the end, to conclude that it hadn't really learnt its lessons. It wasn't going to change, and therefore it was not best placed to be trusted by the public to do things differently if it was ever lucky enough to be in office again. Yeah,
and I will move on to that in a sec. While we are on the family stuff, your wife is also going to join the Reform Party, is that correct? She has joined it? Did that influence your decision as well?
No, she did it after I joined.
Oh, I see.
But she has her own mind, and so no, we're all excited by it. I have to say, there is a great energy around Reform, which I don't mean this in a disrespectful way. There just isn't in the Conservative Party right now. It feels like a party that's on the way out, whilst Reform feels like it's a party that's got genuine momentum. And nothing encapsulated that more, than we did an event in Newark, my constituency, on Monday night, and the Reform guys emailed out people within a 30-mile radius of Newark, which is a small town.
There's a lot of people there.
Nottinghamshire, Lincolnshire border, not a very populated area, if you like. And 2,000 people turned up, young and old, all different classes. There were, retired people, as you might expect. But there were also people who just come after a shift at a factory. Or, the security guard said to me at one point, we've confiscated 40 knives. And I was like, blimey, that doesn't sound good. And he said, no, I mean that we've got 40, pen knives and Stanley knives, because they were plumbers and brickies and carpenters who had just having done a day's work in Lincoln or Doncaster and popped in to the rally afterwards. And I thought, there is no way the Conservative Party could attract not just the number of people, but just people, working people like that. I've never been to a Labour Party rally, but I suspect that they couldn't do it either. So it does feel, when you hear the phrase, the People's Army, there's a sense that it's true, actually, that these are ordinary people very worried about the state of the country, living standards in decline, town centres being hollowed out, crime, immigration, public services not performing, despite us all paying so much in tax right now, coming together in this kind of mission, this movement to try and fix things and get us on a better path.
And you obviously have had quite a political journey. You talked last week about how you joined the Conservative Party when you were 16, and now you're joining a very different party. You've been Housing Secretary, you've been an Immigration Minister, you're now in the Reform Party. Many people are asking, how did that journey happen? And was there anything in particular that did influence you? Was it the Home Office, for example, that made you feel that the way that the Conservative Party was operating wasn't the way to go? Was it that time in the Home Office that sort of made you realise that?
I think I've been on a journey that many people in the country have. If you look back 10, 15, 20 years ago, I suspect most people felt that the country was broadly heading in the right direction, though there were problems, don't get me wrong, and the financial crash was a moment where people really questioned whether the economy was fair and the right decisions have been made by our politicians. But more recently, many, many people, myself included, have seen that the state just isn't working. And I saw that very strikingly, actually, firstly, when I was Housing Secretary, when I set out to change the planning system, build more homes, get young people onto the housing ladder. And it was an immense struggle. And most Conservative MPs just didn't have, the guts to do it. They were too worried about vested interests to actually get on and build the homes, letting people down, losing all the jobs and the growth that could have come with that. And I felt very despondent
so it's been a slow...
the government wasn't willing to do what was necessary to turn the country around. And then at the Home Office, that was even more apparent to me, because I walked into a department, which I'd never served in previously, where everything was broken. You had thousands of people crossing in the small boats. The legal migration system that had been designed post-Brexit was doing precisely the opposite of what had been promised to the public. Thousands and thousands of people were coming in, mostly low-wage, low-skilled people, which has a big impact because that costs a lot of money, and it means you're undercutting the wages of British workers in the factories and distribution centres where many of my constituents work. You had crime as a result of the illegal migration coming into hotels, costing billions of pounds that people hated and still find deeply and rightly offensive. And the state just was failing in its most basic functions. And yeah, that did radicalise me. It did leave me feeling that the Conservative Party, but the political class more generally, had let people down through incompetence, but also through a sort of disdain. It made promises and then done precisely the opposite. And I wasn't willing to be a part of that. And perhaps I should have come to those conclusions sooner, but I did. And that's why I resigned from Rishi Sunak's cabinet, began to campaign against these things on the backbenches. I voted against the government. And when I was elected in 2024, it was almost against my own party. There were things on my leaflets like leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, which were not Conservative Party policy back then. And the big divide in British politics I've come to see from that experience and everything that I've thought about since is yes, left and right, but is more between people who believe the country is broken, is in a mess, needs radical change to really boost people's wages and living standards, to fix the public services, to stop migration causing the harm that it is right now. And those people who think it's not that bad. We can tinker around the edges and make do and mend. At one point my dad was a gas fitter, and the analogy that he gave me was it's the difference between, when your boiler breaks down for the umpteenth time, is the difference between asking the gas fitter to patch it up once again, even though you know in your heart that you're going to be in the same position in a few months' time and you're all going to be freezing again in the house and calling out the same bloke to come and fix it, or saying, you know what? We need to rip the thing out, get a new boiler, fix it so that we can be warm and secure for another couple of years. And I'm very much in the camp who feels that we've got to do something radical to turn this country around. And my strong feeling is that that's what most people in the country want to see. Yeah. They actually want to see a government that's going to fix things. And I don't believe that's either the current Labour government, because things are going badly wrong, or the last Conservative government and the people who are still leading it today. I just don't think they have the trust, the conviction to turn things around. So we've got to do something different and new. And the best vehicle for that is reform.
And can I ask you what the reaction has been like in the last few weeks to your defection? Obviously, a lot of people from your former party are feeling very hurt. You've obviously been called a traitor. You've been called lots of names under the sun. Lots of people putting out lots of stories about you. How have you reacted to that? How's that made you feel?
Well, it's really water off a duck's back. I mean, I didn't think it would be easy. That's why I thought about it for such a long time, and why so few people do something like this. I've tried not to make it personal.
Kemi Badenoch's made it very personal.
Well, she obviously doesn't like me very much, and she's lashed out. I get that.
I think she's always not liked you.
Well, it makes me think that, yeah. I don't know what she says about other people behind their backs as well. But what she hasn't done is really contested the argument that I've made. You know, in fact, she's confirmed it.
Yeah, she thinks Britain's not broken.
Because I've said Britain is broken. She said it isn't broken. And so in a sense, she's confirmed the central debate that I was talking about. And that is an honest, legitimate debate that crosses political parties in this country today. There will be people in the Labour Party who think that Britain is broken and people who don't. Keir Starmer is the archetypal person who thinks that Britain isn't broken, the kind of civil servant turned prime minister who thinks that the system basically works. You can just keep on tinkering around the edges. I disagree.
Yeah.
And the people that I represent in North Nottinghamshire, I believe their lives are tough at the moment. You know, their wages are stagnating. The energy bills, food bills are rising. They can't get their kids onto the housing ladder. The potholes in the roads, the waiting list on the NHS. If you don't see what's happening in their lives is difficult and requires radical change, then I think you're walking different streets to me. I don't think you're in touch with what's happening in the country.
And one of those things is obviously migration, which you were at the heart of when you were in government. Why do you think that Nigel Farage is the man to stop the boats when you were arguably trying to do that yourself and found yourself unable to do so?
Well, the experience that I had was that you have to have a prime minister who will have your back. If you don't have a prime minister who is gripped by the importance of this issue and willing to do what's necessary, you can have the most determined Home Secretary or immigration minister and they will just be banging their heads against a brick wall. And that's what happened to Suella Braverman and to me. I mean, ultimately, I did get some things done when I threatened to resign. That was the point that Rishi Sunak finally agreed to make the changes to the legal migration system that is now bearing fruit. And you're seeing the numbers rapidly falling and will do for years to come. But you need to have a prime minister who you can rely on, who has conviction and is consistent. And you can say a lot about Nigel Farage, but one of the things that is undoubted is that on this issue, he has been consistent. He was the one who was out in the Channel talking about the small boats before anybody else. In fact, many people laughed at him at the time. They don't laugh now. He was talking about the effects of legal migration when I was a teenager. You know, when Tony Blair opened the doors to people from accession states within Europe, Nigel Farage was one of those people who was saying, well, hang on a minute, this is going to have consequences. It's going to lead to pressure on housing and public services, and it might undercut the wages of workers. And it did. He was right. And so he has great consistency on some of the most important issues in British politics. And at a time of peril for the country, where there are huge challenges, you do need a strong leader. And if you were faced with a choice between Keir Starmer, Kemi Badenoch, and Nigel Farage, you know, in the blink of an eye, I would say Nigel, because he is a strong person with very strong convictions on the main issues.
Would you like to serve as Home Secretary under Nigel Farage Prime Minister?
I honestly don't know. I mean, we have talked about my own interests and
there's obviously lots of unfinished business there in the Home Office.
Well, I want to see that issue resolved 100%, but ultimately it's his decision. But I've been very impressed by him in the short period that we've worked together. He's extremely hardworking. He's somebody who drives the team, has generated the energy and momentum that there is right now, and is setting out now to build a strong team and have serious, detailed, credible, honest policies as to how you'll fix the country. And that's what reform has to do, to prove to the public that we deserve their votes and are a government in waiting.
Just before I let you go, just a few other international matters which we've been seeing playing out on our screens over the last few days, totally dominating this week. Do you think Britain should be joining the Board of Peace, bearing in mind Putin is going to be on it too? Do you think that's something that your party would support?
Well, I haven't discussed this with Nigel, but I have my own reservations about it, given that Putin is going to be a part of it. So we'll have to see, but it doesn't feel like it's the right vehicle to be a part of.
What's your view on how we should as a country deal with Donald Trump? Because that's what we've been talking about all week, hasn't it? You know, obviously getting that balance right between keeping him on side and making sure that he doesn't, go too far. And as you said on Monday, it was unacceptable for him to threaten tariffs. He's now rode back from that. This evening, he's, attacking over Chagos. He's saying our troops stayed away from the front line in Afghanistan, which is just not true. How do we deal with a man like Donald Trump?
Well, I think you just have to be honest, don't you? It's the United States is our most important ally. It's our greatest trading partner. We have such a deep relationship of history and people to people. But the point of being friends with another country is that you can have a very honest relationship, and there'll be areas where we agree with the United States and with the Trump administration. There will be times where we vehemently disagree, and you've seen some of those most recently. I said, as did Nigel, that the idea that you should deploy bully boy tactics to try to take over Greenland, like starting a tariff war, was completely wrong. And it sounds like he's backed away from that.
Yeah.
Now, you do have to understand where the United States is coming from. And there are very serious strategic security concerns about Greenland and the Arctic. None of us want to see Russia or China gain a foothold in that very important area in the years ahead. It will be one of the most contested parts of the globe in our lifetime. And so the United States has a legitimate issue, which should matter to us as well, because it affects British security interests as well as those of the United States. But you resolve that diplomatically when you're dealing with friends and allies, not by threatening them with tariffs or military action.
And today, Nigel has said that the world will be a lot safer if the US controlled Greenland. Obviously, Keir Starmer has taken a very different approach, saying he's not going to be sort of pushed into this position, thinks that Greenland and only Denmark should have the right to do so. What makes Nigel and the Reform Party think that Greenland will be safer under Donald Trump?
Well, I think the point that Nigel was making is the one I really just made, that this is going to be a very contested space. You can't allow Russia and China to gain a foothold. This will only grow in importance in the years ahead as rising temperatures and melting ice caps open up new waterways through which our adversaries can travel. And you've got to ensure that there is a very strong security arrangement in place in and around Greenland.
So do you think that we should be giving Greenland to America?
No, of course not. But
it might be safer if we did.
But I do think that the United States has to have a strong security presence there. And that can be done in different ways. There already is a treaty in place which could enable the US to deploy more defense equipment and troops there. At the height of the Cold War, there were 15,000 troops in Greenland. Today, there's a fraction of that. So it's some kind of arrangement along those lines that will be
there is a deal to
necessary.
be done here, basically.
It strikes me that there is a deal to be done, and it's a deal which is not just about protecting the security of the interests of the United States, but our own as well, because it would be greatly to the UK's detriment if our adversaries gain some kind of foothold or able to move freely around that area uncontested. But we want to do that in a sensible way, which respects the people who live in Greenland, respects the sovereignty of Denmark, and maintains the the unity of NATO, which is, at the end of the day, the foundation of European defence and security.
And today we've got the news the former Labour MP Andrew Gwynn set to retire, leaving free a possible return for Andy Burnham.
Very interesting.
Do you think Reform will give him a run for their money in the North West?
Well, we definitely will try to, yeah. I mean, if you look at the polls, it seems to be a two-horse race between Labour and Reform. And so if Labour tries to parachute in some apparatchik from outside the area, 100%. I think people should be voting Reform. If Andy Burnham sees it as an opportunity to quit being Mayor of Manchester and make a dash for Westminster, despite always decrying Westminster and saying that he was the King of the North, then Reform will give him a run for his money. The fact that we're having this conversation just reflects the fact that the country really is in a two-horse race at the moment.
Do you think that's where the next election is going to go?
I do. Yeah. I really do. Look, the Conservative Party, sadly, I say because I've been a part of it, or was a part of it for a very long time, is largely irrelevant, in particular in the Midlands and the North. It's going to has retreated to a party that represents pockets of affluence, mainly around London and the South East. In most of the country, it is now going to be a simple debate. Do you want Nigel Farage and Reform and the change that will bring, or do you want Keir Starmer or whoever might replace him if he gets booted out in the future, and the Labour Party, and sticking with the plan and the record of the current government? That's the simple choice, really, that people will be faced with in most parts of the country at the next general election.
How do you feel that Labour has this week been calling your party fascist? Do you agree with that?
No, it's childish, it's puerile, and it's one of the reasons why people are turning away from the Labour Party. What do they mean by that? Is raising issues about immigration or crime or integration fascism? And it's actually offensive, isn't it? Because racism, fascism, it's undermining these terms to bandy them around. And when you really see people who have abhorrent views, far right views, they should be condemned, contested as strongly as possible. But if you bandy them around, spray them around like confetti to people who don't share those views at all, then it weakens and diminishes those views. So it's very disappointing, actually. But it explains why, so many people are moving to other political parties. I think it was Lisa Nandy who said that on the TV at the weekend. She's a member of Parliament for Wigan. I bet Wigan is exactly the sort of place which might be voting Reform at the next general election. And people in Wigan who will feel hacked off by the Labour Party will be turning on their TVs, hearing somebody saying, well, you're all fascists because you talk about immigration, and thinking, these people don't represent me at all. Yeah. They deserve to be booted out.
And finally, we've obviously talked quite a lot about your career and where you've gone and your new role. Is there any regrets? Is there anything you think I would have done that a bit differently?
Oh, there's lots of regrets. I mean, I'm the first to admit that I've got some things wrong when I've been in politics.
Go on.
But
one example. Which was your biggest?
Oh, there's probably too many. I mean, I've definitely got stuff wrong. I regret that I didn't, achieve more in some of the roles that I've done. I probably wrestled with this decision about leaving the Conservative Party for too long. And I certainly shouldn't.
Painting over mural.
I certainly shouldn't have left my speech lying on my desk in my office.
You shouldn't have, yeah.
Too trusting.
Yes, I think that's fair. Robert Jenrick, thank you so much for joining me on LBC.
Thank you very much.